Hello everyone and welcome back to Ecospacegy Talk Show. In this talk show, we aim to showcase young people making waves in the environmental realm throughout Guyana. And today we have Miss Christine Samwaroo. So thank you for joining us, and I'd like you to tell them a little bit about yourself, your main focus within the environmental realm of Guyana, so what you've been doing.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. Hi everyone, I'm Christine Samwaroo, and I'm the founder and managing director of the Breadfruit Collective, which is a gender and environmental justice organization that's based in Guyana.
I'd like to mention that I have actually met Christine during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes, but we met online thanks to the pandemic.
Yes.
So I always wanted to ensure that I gave her the space that she gave me at a workshop to speak and to highlight my interest within environmental education in the wider world and in Guyana, particularly when it comes to young women and girls. So let's just get right into it. How would you say has environmental degradation specifically impacted women and with their and girls in the gender and equity realm of Guyana?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. And that's exactly the work I aim to do with the Breadfruit Collective. As I mentioned before, it's an organization that uses a feminist intersectional lens to deal with the issues of environmental justice and gender justice. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about gender justice, we're talking about everything from gender-based violence, reproductive access, and basically the issues that directly affect women and girls in Guyana. Mm-hmm. We know that when it comes to gender-based violence, 1 in every 2 women in Guyana experience some sort of violence in their lifetime. So when you add on the climate crisis to that and climate destruction, you can imagine the impact that the women and girls, they would face as a marginalized group. When disaster happens, they're most likely to be affected. Globally, 80% of women and girls are the most vulnerable to climate impacts.
Yeah, so when, as we have mentioned continuously, the environment affects everyone, and it can also have a cumulative effect on persons, a compounded effect. So you're already marginalized, you're already a victim of certain circumstances, certain levels of abuse, certain levels of disadvantage, and then it's compounded by the effects of climate change, the effects of global warming, plus poverty maybe, and plus, and it really oftentimes affects women and girls. And I'd like you to state how, right, can promoting gender equality and empowering women, as you do through the Breadfruit Collective, how does that lead to more effective environmental policies and solutions?
Yeah, thank you for that question again. And I would like to say that within the climate space, what we notice is a lot of the people that are doing the work, the advocacy work, are young people, and specifically young women. For example, you.
Yes.
And you're raising the issues. But what we see is the people at the decision-making table, they're not usually girls.
No.
And so it's really important to bring young girls, young people at the table when we're making the decision. Because not only are they affected, but they are the ones who will be inheriting the planet that's continuously affected by climate change. They understand the issue because they're on the front line of the effects of it. Yeah,
and it's oftentimes where in that aspect where we say we need more representation. And the UN Envoy to Youth, it was actually a young lady of Indian descent. I don't know her name. Her name is slipping me at the moment. But if you do Google UN on Envoy to Youth, she's a young lady of East Indian descent, and she said many times when people are to meet her, especially persons in high position, especially men, when she enters the room or they enter the room with her, they don't recognize that it's her. They often don't expect to see a young person, a young woman in this diplomatic position. But that is what we've been saying. We are equipped, we are educated, we are certified. We just sometimes we may need experience. How do you get experience? By doing the work.
Yeah.
And sometimes a lot of young people have informal experience, but it can actually help them in getting informal positions. And when it comes to environmental protection, women's rights, equality, and so on, the voice has been throughout the years, young people speaking out, young people saying, well, we need to have action now.
Correct.
We have persons like Greta Thunberg, who one person of the year, saying, well, I am a youth and I am saying that I'm striking until my government does what they're supposed to when it comes to environment, climate action and so on. Climate justice is needed. We have seen young people coming to the forefront. So are there any specific strategies or approaches you find particularly effective when it comes to this form of empowerment, when it comes to fighting for women's rights, fighting for girls' rights, fighting for climate justice?
Yes, definitely it starts with involvement because women and girls, they already have the lived experience, and that's extremely important. When we think about climate change and the effects that people have, it doesn't always mean that the people at the university level have the most experience and therefore they should be involved in the conversation. But people on the front line, and definitely involving people in a way that's intentional, I think that's important. And because I lead with a feminist framework, and what that means is partnership and collaboration. Partnership and collaboration with people who are doing similar work on the ground. For example, over the weekend, we had our first ever expo in Guyana that was devoted to menstrual health and hygiene. And we partnered with young women's group across Guyana, and we had a really successful event. So partnership, collaboration, and another aspect of this, you and I met through a mentorship program, definitely equipping young women with the skills that we may not have had, but equipping them for the future, because we're preparing them for a future that we don't know what it looks like. And therefore, we need to equip them with the skills. And with relevant skills, we need to be there for them, support them in a way that would be valuable.
Yes, because oftentimes you can have the lived experience, but you must be able to communicate it in such a way that people understand your plight, they understand the movement, they understand your emotions in such a way that it moves them to make a change. The person who's empowered, the person who can actually make the change, must be able to relate in such a way or understand you to the point where they're able to actually answer your call, right? And I recently attended a conference, and there was a young lady presenting on a study she's currently doing in Ghana. And she's a PhD candidate at Notre Dame. And she's looking at the different aspects of gender inequality in Ghana. And she said what really kind of discouraged her a bit, or encouraged her to do the work, but discouraged her, was when Kamala Harris went to Ghana and said she's going to help solve gender equality issues with technology. So, as you said, just because you have been to university doesn't mean you know it all. Did you do the groundwork through it? What was actually affecting the young ladies or the older women in Ghana? What has caused them to not be on the same level as the men? Oftentimes it's not technology. Sometimes it's the social ills within the society. And oftentimes the persons within that society are the ones doing somewhat of successful projects, or our community-based projects are oftentimes the most successful ones within the community. And she did highlight some persons who are doing some successful community-based projects. So can you provide some examples of successful initiatives or projects that you have known or have been a part of, have seen, that help empower women, to help spread the knowledge of women equality, of climate justice, and so on?
Yeah, it's really necessary for us to involve grassroots women, because they're the closest to the problem, and therefore they're the closest to the solutions. And it's not up to us to come up with solutions to solve the problems they face. It's for us to equip them with the skills. And I must say that what brought me to this work is my grandmother and the domestic violence that she experienced in her life. And as a grassroots woman, she was somebody that was very much, her lived experience was what she used to fight against domestic violence and to spread awareness on the issues that we have in Guyana. So growing up and having somebody like that, and that's an example of a grassroots woman using her own lived experience to empower others. In the Caribbean, we have a lot of new initiatives that are coming on, and I love the fact that it's being led by young women, and I like that they're using this intersectional lens. So they're not looking at an issue through a narrow focus, but they're trying to understand how one issue can have several impacts. And I wanted to highlight an amazing project being done in St. Lucia through Helen's daughter, and it's an agriculture project, farming project aiming to empower women through farming, through agriculture, to improve their livelihood. Also, both of us were a part of the Girls Care program.
Yes.
And that's a mentorship program. So again, equipping girls, connecting them with people right in the Caribbean, specifically women that are interested in the environmental field, that are working in the environmental field, so that we have a first-hand experience of what it's like to be in those positions. And I must say, through the Breadfruit Collective, we aim to continue on with our Caribbean Women for Climate Justice Conference. That's something that we held this year. There was the second year we were able to put it on in collaboration with the Climate Conscious podcast. And it aims to be a space whereby Caribbean people, specifically Caribbean women and queer people, can use the space to speak about the climate issues and the climate solutions that they face. And again, highlighting the issues from a Caribbean standpoint.
Yeah, I like how you say that we have to highlight issues from the Caribbean standpoint, because the plight of the Caribbean woman, the Caribbean person is unique, and we don't realize that. Yeah. And as I said, the past conference I attended showed me how unique our plight is. We as a people have progressed in tremendously in certain ways, but we're still in the past in certain ways. Yeah. So it is like we're either really ahead or really behind, or sometimes in the middle. And maybe in each country it might be different, but there's some really unique aspects of the Caribbean culture that has either propelled the woman further or kept her back.
Yeah.
Right? So like in Guyana, we have really progressive when it comes to abortion rights and so on. There are entities available for women to make that choice. But there's also the issue of having women in high positions, right? Who are actually represented and actually compensated correctly. So it's oftentimes either we can be inspiring or we need to work on having more inspiring stories.
Correct.
And there are oftentimes barriers that we would face. As you would have mentioned, there are wonderful initiatives and so on. But what are some of the main barriers that you would say hinder women's participation in leadership, especially when it comes to equality, environmental justice, action, and so on? As we have to be a lot of times realistic that there are some things we face.
Yeah, I must say, just because a woman is in high position also, it doesn't mean that she's leading in a way that's equitable for everyone. And that's really, really important, because when we think of people in high position, we also have to think about things like class and race. All these play a role in how a person lead. And I think in Guyana, like you mentioned, we have a lot of great things, like our ancestors, our history is really important. Our indigenous people, it's all necessary when we think of climate solutions, because they all give us solutions. They're all things that we can tap into. I think some of the barriers are, the social norms. They are still roles that, the way we view them in society, this role is specifically for male, this one is for female, this is how you behave, this is how you shouldn't behave. So I think those social norms definitely there hinders our growth, and they trap us in a box. And I think we have the potential to bloom and get out of that box that we're placed in. I think the environment and the climate crisis, it provides a way for us to be innovative with the solutions that we come up with.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't need to reinvent the wheel, as you said. Indigenous persons have the solution. And that's one thing I learned. I said to myself that I'm really happy that my country has given the indigenous persons throughout our country, throughout Guyana, the rights they deserve. And when I've heard of so many countries having their names changed from the indigenous names, having the indigenous lands taken away from them being killed, I'm like, no, we have an entire act protecting our indigenous persons. We have a month dedicated to our indigenous persons. We allow them to have their shared knowledge. We learn from them. We respect them. And that is the same way we must be towards women in general. We learn from women, regardless of social standing, regardless of their educational background. There's something you can learn from everyone. And when we hear a person's plight, we see what they have to say, we recognize the inequality within our society, even amongst women. And what steps can you say can be taken to address those inequalities, address the challenges you just said?
Yeah.
What are some key steps that you may have taken or that you definitely want to see taken?
Yeah, I think through my work with the Breadfruit Collective, it's really understanding and educating the masses of people to understand this connection between gender and climate justice and justice in general, because it is an issue of justice.
Yeah.
And when the climate crisis, when destruction happens, it affects people. However, not everybody's affected equally. So making that connection, I think it's really necessary, and understanding that for us as a society, we really have to heal our relationship between the environment, how we treat it, how we treat our women and girls. I think that relationship needs to be healed, and also understanding our history as people that came from colonization, living in a capitalistic society. We have to unpack all of that. And I think that although it is daunting and these are big issues, I'm very much pleased that people in the Caribbean have taken on the role, especially women. And as I always come back to it, like for example, you're having this talk show, and it's a way for us to spread awareness, and also take these issues that may seem very complex and break it down into pieces that a regular person can understand.
Take it one step at a time.
Yeah.
There are things we need to unpack, things we need to speak about, but we can do it one step at a time. And oftentimes we try to do too much at once and overwhelms persons. But no, the approach is always sometimes something simple as just having a panel discussion, right? And speaking to schools, and we can overcome a lot of barriers by just speaking to persons and also listening to persons.
Correct. Yes.
And so you've heard about the Breadfruit Collective. Breadfruit, that's not something is boiled, fry, or bake. The potato of the Caribbean. So what inspired this name, Breadfruit Collective?
Yes, I love this question because I love the name of the organization. And the breadfruit plant, it's climate resilient. So it can survive flood and droughts. And when you think of food security in the Caribbean, breadfruit, they're always blooming, they're always growing. If you travel across the Caribbean, you would see breadfruit trees. And the Caribbean, we are very proud of our breadfruit. And although my organization focuses on the issues that girls and women face, I didn't want it to be a name that would, like, I guess a feminist, say like feminist is in the name or women or girls is in the name. I wanted it to be something that related back to nature. When people hear it, they can be more intrigued by it. And I also want to say that the breadfruit plant, it's something that's has historical meaning as well, because we know the people that arrive in Guyana, our history, they brought over the plant from Africa. So it's really honoring the plant, honoring nature. And I love to say this, because the plant is so resilient, I relate that to women in the Caribbean. Yes.
Women are so resilient. Women are the strongest, the strongest beings to ever grace this earth are women. We oftentimes are overlooked by the strength, but it takes a lot of emotional strength to be a woman. It takes a lot of courage to step out and say, and speak your mind and say, well, and not be labeled an angry woman. Or in such a, there's such a uniqueness in the woman to reach the emotional or to tap into the emotional aspect of things. So think about linking women or gender with climate change and showing the inequalities of it all. Really and truly, a woman can really do that. And do it in such a way that we even link it to a plant named breadfruit. and I like to highlight that one thing I would like to show, I have a friend who actually did a study on this, how the weather affects crime. And one of those crimes is domestic violence, rape, and so on. And she showed how climate change, the unpredictability of weather and the intensity of rain and so on, how it can actually impact these different types of crime. So that's something I will highlight. So person can also have a further link to show how climate change impacts women and children and girls and so on. And so as we close, I like Miss Christine to give a few words of encouragement to the public and to spread a little more knowledge about your Breadfruit Collective, really can see your work, really can follow you, and to leave them with a positive note.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for having me here. You're someone that I really admire, and I want to say to everyone, when I look at the environment, I look at it through an intersecting lens, meaning that the work I do, it intersects with mental health, it intersects with gender, education, gender-based violence. And so any work that you're involved in, you definitely have a connection to the environment, because we all depend on the environment. We all depend on healthy food, healthy air to breathe, healthy water. So I really, truly believe that people can get involved in the environment in whatever field they're a part of, or whatever their passion is. I think we need the masses of people to care, and we really need to care because of the realities that we're living in. In Guyana, in the Caribbean, we're very vulnerable to climate change. But like as I mentioned before, we have a lot of solutions to tap into. And we have a lot of incredible people doing great things in the Caribbean. And a lot can get done when people work together. So I would encourage you to connect with a group that's doing environmental work. It can be in Guyana, it can be in the Caribbean, it can be international. Definitely finding your community is one way to motivate and inspire change. And for the Breadfruit Collective, I would say you can always find us on our Instagram page, our Facebook social media pages, also on the website. And I would also like to mention that currently we have a mentorship program we have just launched for young girls between the ages of 16 to 23 to apply. And again, it's matching sustainable development and all the issues of social justice, and getting young women involved with it and helping them to forge their passion and their interests.
Yes, and you heard it from Christine. Through, and she has collective in her name. Through collective efforts, we can really inspire change. So check out the Breadfruit Collective today. Thank you for watching.